hear more about that or read more about it, we have newspaper clippings. One of them stuck in my copy of the book. But that's the tragedy of the Eastons. Quite talented. They wrote a lot of books, and I was reminded again. I think, were you there when the GPS marker was put in?
Yeah.
One of these Eastons is the inventor of the GPS system.
Wow.
And if you just think about where GPS has gone since
He
then,
came to present at the church.
it's incredible. But he got patented. He got presidential medals. There's a big, thick shelf full of stuff regarding Roger for this. And I think his son is the one who talked to somebody here, was willing to come and talk sometime about his father's achievements. And they're quite amazing. Let's see. All right.
Yes,
Good,
17.
good. Okay. And then Sterling got it. And Sterling used to, the senior boys used to be able to go underneath the barn part of this whole structure and smoke pipes. The only place any tobacco was allowed in the prep school days.
Oh, boys, come on now.
It wasn't ladylike.
The boys were very well mannered. No bad habits. Little Freddie, your ghost still walks.
I like that old picture from the 50s with the gas pumps
I love
out.
that. And that's one of the best photos in the whole collection.
Yeah.
That is gorgeous. Oh, you really do.
I wonder if the tanks are still buried.
Yeah.
Well, this is a nice house.
Needs a little work. They're still working on it. How many decades have you been on this?
I don't know, but I think this is this weekend's
Look how
job.
fast we come. What's going on?
Here's another one. And the name Rawson
Thank you.
figures in this one, as does the name Scott. When I first came here, the headmaster was living there, and this was called what?
Lilac. Cottage.
Lilac Cottage. But somebody destroyed all the lilacs.
They were dead, half dead.
Okay, I'll take your word for it. The building is still standing. And how old do you think it looks?
30 years old.
Looks brand new. Looks brand new. You know, that's the problem with some of these surveys. If it isn't the original building on the site, they kind of say, yeah, you know, this is not terribly old. But 1930 or so. In fact, it would have been shortly after a beautiful brick house spent almost 100 years on this site. And the name Scott figures into your deeds and all that stuff if you track it back. But we have a lot of postcards, and it was one of the few brick buildings around. We got one still standing. You know, the academy is gone, the Young's place, but it was neat. And it had, because of one woman, young woman, in the Scott family, of which there was Joseph Scott Sr. and then Jr., and they were quite a big part of the structure of the town. she ended up marrying a Rawson in Iowa. So she leaves here, goes all the way out to Iowa, marries, and it was Charles. There were a handful of these travelers already there in Des Moines, Iowa. And so she was she's left her home here. She's newly married out in Iowa, and she's probably, schizophrenic or something.
What era was that?
She would have left in after the Civil War, just barely. And she was a lovely woman, and there are a lot of pictures in albums that we have here with her in it. And that said something about her beauty and the family name, if you will. But now we're getting. So we've got. Let me see. Okay.
Yeah. Oh.
Okay. One of the neatest things I think we have in the Historical Society. Imagine taking an old book like the Department of Agriculture for 1843 and laboriously cutting out with scissors anything that had to do with something of interest to you. Usually it's family things, births, deaths, marriages, movements, all the stuff that makes for a family history. This survived the fire that I'm going to mention here in a minute. And it survived the ownership sort of by, people like our headmaster and a couple other folks and all. And it was given to us, and I can't remember who it was, but it's just this thing stuffed with newspaper clippings, carefully set in for the most part. And one day, Murder in Craftsbury, 1872. That's how it starts out. And somewhere in the 1820s and right up into the 1880s, there are things both in Des Moines going on, often to members of this Rawson family, which had gotten quite, well known, doctors, businessmen, whatnot, that we ended up having a handful, a family plus of Rawsons coming back to the old family homestead, which was, of course, the brick building. The original Scott buildings, I understand, were supposed to have been a little bit east and a little bit south of your current building. I didn't know whether you had anything to say or whether you've ever found any evidence of a...
Not over there, but Sonny Sweat told me that his home used to be over there. And that, now I don't know, he told me that about a year ago, that it used to be somewhere over there. He said it was on my property.
Sonny Sweat?
Sonny Sweat told me that, yeah.
Boy, that's cool.
And that it was moved down where he currently lives. The other little tidbit that I'm amused by is that whoever lived here had Canton plates. Canton from China.
From China, yeah.
And they use
okay,
Canton,
yeah.
and because I find tiny little shreds of it all the time.
Well, yeah, when we're digging, even
yeah?
just to
We
plant
find
something with
pieces
bricks
of-
and pieces of. So, do you have any pictures of the original house that were here?
I have nothing of the wooden structures.
No, the brick.
The brick, oh yes, we have lots
found
of them.
bricks and horseshoes. Every time
We
we,
have
dig something,
lots of
it's
those, and we
bricks
have some family
horseshoes
members, and
and
they're
pieces of pottery.
Charles is one, and one reason that they came back was that I think it was Charles had almost cut his leg off in some sort of a job-related business. They came back for him to recuperate, and he died of something else shortly after here. But until this, I didn't. Yeah, I forgot. Our file on Fires on the Common, we have a clipping. It's kind of cute, and it talks about, well, on such and such a time on December, whatever, we had a fire on the common. And that brick building was consumed in 1934, 35, I think.
Was it really?
Yeah,
Okay.
right around there. There were a lot of fires, 34 and 35
Wow.
for some reason. One here, Dustin's, so on here.
That chimney cleaner came through town.
Here's the sad part of it. It was totally a human error. Grace Dustin Rawson, who had a daughter, but Grace was here, and she had a little business when this was a tea. It was what's the last name for the? This had a lot of different names, of course. Orleans House, and Pike Hotel, and then one more, which I'm spacing on. She had a little business, a little tea house here, and so she got along okay. She was responsible for, you know, the household, the area. And she had a bad habit of taking wood ashes from the stove
Oh, my.
and bringing them outside and dumping them against a dead tree stump.
Oh, my goodness gracious.
Now, if that isn't stupid, I can't find it now, but we do have somebody, I think it was her, admitting that she didn't do this once but twice. And the second time, it took the whole building down.
Wow.
So she just didn't know the power of fire. And we lost this beautiful brick house. But we have what I call the Rawson Paste-Up book, and it's one of my favorites. And then Grace Dustin Rawson herself wrote a little, short story of her family's goodly heritage. And there are Scots, and you go back to, George Washington days, and they were related to everybody famous in the Revolutionary War area and beyond. And I've always wanted to go to Iowa, and I checked the phone book for Des Moines 6-8 years ago, had 2 or 3 Rawsons
Huh.
still there.
Wow.
And they just don't know what they're missing. That's all we can say. But here, speaking of tragedies, or I will anyway, Nancy Dustin Rawson was one of her children. And she wrote a nice little booklet called Craftsbury Chronicles. It's one of the little small 8-by whatever things, white cover. And it's a wonderful, quick run-through of all the important organizations and things that happened, special events. And it seems to be well done because nobody's crossed it out and said, no, that's not right, which you get tempted to do sometimes. But she wrote that, and it's one of our publications. The library, of course, has these little booklets if you ever want to see them. And she was also obviously interested in history. In 1978, the Historical Society was 1 year old, and I'm not sure where her mother was, but Nancy was intending to come to visit Craftsbury, and I think I was told by the then president of the Historical Society, and I certainly wanted to meet her. Was looking forward to it. But she stopped in Boston, took a hotel room in 1978, and on Christmas Day burned up in a fire.
Oh, my gosh.
And so that was bad luck, and
bad thing
it's a
after
pity that happened to somebody like that. And there are other Rawson little dingoes, but we'll just skip that. One little quick walk over to Doug Field's
David,
house.
just a question. What about the murder?
Yeah, what happened to about the murder?
You said there
The
was a murder.
juicy stuff. Come on.
Why do you say there was a murder here?
Yeah. Murder in Craftsbury.
Oh,
Who
Yeah,
got
murder in
murdered?
Craftsbury, yeah.
Hopefully it was somebody in this house.
Not the trouble
the
with
bottom of Ketchum Hill in 1872 had a house on it, and she had a little boarding house. I can't think of her name. It's kind of a funny one, but some of the family were out playing cards or something, and somebody, a veteran of the Civil War from East Craftsbury, was drunk, and he got kind of nasty, and they threw him out, and he didn't just go home, he tried to get back in, and so the family, the people inside, decided they better disabuse him, and they shot, and he died from the wound.
Oh, okay.
So that's, luckily it didn't happen here.
Well,
It doesn't
Catch 'em
happen,
hell is pretty-
nothing like that happens on the common. Other places.
that's very crowded.
It hasn't happened yet.
Oops, that's right. We'll have spies here.
Front end of town.
You don't have to worry, they're not home. Good. Vincent chatter. One of the neatest glass plate negatives we have is of this building, as it was Civil War era. And I don't have it here, but you can imagine a sort of little stairway and a long porch, and you can just read the word post office here, and there was somebody, you know, in a Abraham Lincoln hat sitting there. So this building is obviously at least Civil War era, or was. The people who own this now are working hard to get recognition for a building that is older than some people want to acknowledge. And they may go to the trouble of getting another brick chimney here with washed bricks, whatever they are. And they're doing everything right, and they're very interested in, you know, maintaining what historical features this building has and still has. How they're going to do, I don't know, but we're getting help from them also on, you know, one of our projects, as I mentioned, glass plate negatives preservation. Actually, it's appropriate. There's no real tragedy here. The best I can do was say that Douglas Field, one of the founders of Sterling School, college, whatever, a teacher moving from one boarding school to a brand new school here in 1958. And just prior to this move with his 4 children, his wife died of cancer.
Oh, Jiminy.
And so Doug was sort of stuck there, and he was batching it for the kids. And, you know, it was a tragedy, obviously, but I think it's appropriate. He mentioned her maiden name when they were brainstorming what they call Sterling School. And guess what his wife's middle name was, or married name? Sterling. He said, how about my wife? You know, her name is Sterling. And people kind of thought, oh, yeah, I like that. And so she lives on in the name of Sterling anyway. And Doug Field, when I came here, Doug was still teaching math, the kind of teacher you made sure you had your homework done. And he didn't take any guff from anybody, and he was feared but revered, I guess. You may have had a teacher in your life somewhere where they didn't let you get away from anything. But on the other hand, you truly knew he was a good teacher. And Doug Field fit all those capacities. He was the treasurer of the Historical Society in its early days, or just for that. Of course, he taught here as well. He had other jobs in town.
School board.
And yeah, school board, you just go on and on. And in 1983, I interviewed him. We did a Doug Field interview, you know, what was your life like, where'd you come from, what do you think of the school, how did the local townspeople get along with these new kids on town, and, you know, and everything. And it's on a cassette. Here's,
Oh my goodness.
there's that, and then there are my handwritten notes, which are here also, of course, scribbled and hard to read. But it's been interesting since I haven't located, I'm looking for that Doug Field interview. And it might be in the archives up there. We don't have a copy right now. I don't know why. But I'd like to compare the finished product with the cassette and what Doug told me casually and unofficially. And in one case, he well, he says something to the effect, this is off the record, and I had to scratch the record so that nobody could hear. And I know what he was talking about because I'd already heard the story, and everyone involved is long gone. So it's basically Sterling kids knew that this man living on the common loved stamps, and they pretended to be stamp collectors, and so he had a little stamp club going, and they'd come and visit him at his house, and you know, just gobble up all he had to say about stamps, while the other guys were in another room opening up the liquor cabinet, stealing booze from it, which wasn't the nicest thing to do. And so the boys...
That's why nobody collects stamps anymore. That did it. Everybody decided from then on.
I started a stamp club that lasted about half a year, and Doug Field was helping me with that. And I still have postcards with the Sterling moniker on it that Doug gave me so I could give them to the school kids. But you're right, stamp collecting is dead.
Yeah.
It's sad, but there once was. Okay, so Doug, I don't have anything that Doug wrote, but we have his interview, and anybody who comes back from Sterling from the old days will always ask after, or did ask after, Mr. Field, and that's all you need to hear, and you know he was revered. But this house dates back, finishing up right now.
Wow.
This house dates back to about 1809 to 1815.
Wow.
And a man named Benjamin Clark ran the store here. He had a wife, and she's buried right over there in the corner. And I guess she's the only one. I don't see him in the same place. But Benjamin Clark, he had the honor of being the last husband of the woman I was talking about, Augusta.
Right down the road.
Yeah, I can't even say it myself. Augusta, so on, something, Hamilton. You can count 4 husbands from here to where we started, pretty much. And he was the last. He must have been pretty old. But as soon as they got married, which was the same year that his wife died, which is
Interesting.
Scandalous.
really,
Yeah.
it was fast work on his part. But he and his new wife, Augusta Crafts Patterson, moved over to here. And that's on the other side of the road, so we can't go there. That is where Augusta died in post-Civil War days. But you have to, there's a letter referring to looking out the window, the bedroom of Augusta, who was her aunt. They had, when he married her, all those kids were half brothers and sisters, of course. But she could look out, and if you know where Larry and Ryan's place is, that's where she got started. And that was the north end of the common, way up there. And this was the end of the common on the south side. So big doings. And so there's a whole big chunk of real estate and houses and people in the middle. And then you can sneak over to the western side and expand your understanding of who was here before we were, are. Hopefully for a long time, and stay healthy, and all that sort of stuff.
Dave, this house is quite old too, right? And this was 1815.
1815. Yeah, that's got a whole history there. I didn't bring it, but Jennifer's, we had a little window box there of stuff that was found inside the structure here.
Wow.
And I don't...
That's a pretty grand building for that old,
Oh yeah, and as I recall, if these walls could talk, you mentioned in it. Didn't you live here?
We lived here for 3 years. Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, 3 years. I
That was
lived.
our bedroom, that corner room right there.
And mine was over just on the other side of that cupola there. I was a bachelor at the time, so I'll say nothing more.
So when Sterling did various things, we were worried about this roof. We went up there, we got some structural engineers up there. And it's got not squared rounders, but they're just trees that were peeled and put together.
Wow.
And no collar ties at all. They go the whole width of that building. And the engineer took it around and said, "This building should have fallen down." There it is. Straight as can be.
Oh my gosh.
So they did a good job, and thank God for that.
Yeah, it's straight.
Oh well.
And it had a ballroom on the
That's
second
really
floor.
fascinating.
Went all the way
Well,
to
And thank you for the book you gave me, by the way. I haven't read it.
I've got a whole bunch of them waiting for you.
I'm working my way through the Middle Ages right now. Thanks, Dave.
Dave, thank you.
Well, you're welcome.
Thank you
So much.
I appreciate your interest.
So when is the next chat? Yeah, when's the next
Oh, well,
When the next scandal happens.
I've got to come down from this. When you start researching, there's no end to it. And that's where I'm just what do I do? No, I don't need that. So thanks for your
Oh my gosh, this is
patience.
wonderful.
Ask Sonny about what he told me.